Hey there, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Shane Snipes, and this is BMCC's Business Management Department, and specifically the Entrepreneurship degree program. We're so excited to have the Global Entrepreneurship Week happening, and November 12th through the 18th in 2018. We're creating some timeless content here for a lot of different reasons. We really are covering a lot of different areas, and I'm excited today to have a host of different entrepreneurs coming on board. Today, we're going to be talking with Reza Chowdhury, and he's really going to be going into the way that his career evolved as an entrepreneur, but also as a business person. So we'll be getting into his degree program and what that looks like. This is going to add into our final culmination tomorrow on Friday, where we talk to another entrepreneur. Check out some of the other folks. Talonia had experience specifically in becoming a successful author and becoming a successful self-help coach. And she's worked with a lot of different people and provided tons of resources there. Sheila Cochran yesterday was chatting about what are the legal ramifications of being in a startup, but also how do you create an entrepreneurial venture when it comes to a legal practice. Reza Chowdhury is going to be talking to us specifically about tech and how you evolve into tech. Everyone thinks you have to be like this super techie to get into tech. And as he and I will discuss in this webinar today, we're really just going to be talking about how careers evolve, things have changed, and the world of work has evolved in such a huge way. He's the CEO and founder of AlleyWatch, and he has a lot of different hybrid organizations that have evolved out of that. We're going to talk about how that happens these days so you can get a grasp on what it means to really evolve in this new universe that we now live in with the work world. So thanks so much for joining us today. As I mentioned, I'm Shane Snipes, and I am super excited to be here and super excited to have Reza here with me. Welcome, Reza. Thanks so much for being with me.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So as we go through all the different pieces of your life, we're going to dig into your life today. We're going to explore your life. We're going to see what it was like to sort of get into this universe of tech. But I really want you to start from the beginning. I want you to talk about some of the ways that you focused in on when you first started out. You were in college, freshman year. You probably saw that some things were happening with tech, and you may or may not have known kind of what you were going to do with those things. What were some of the ways that you started to recognize that there may have been an opportunity in tech, or were you even thinking about it at that point?
Back in college, when I first started, to date myself, we were still on dial-up internet. So we were accessing through actual modems and stuff. So it was definitely sort of a different world. I
remember this sound?
undergrad.
Wait, do you remember this sound?
Yeah, yeah. Certainly, yeah. And internet speeds were certainly not what they are today. But, during the, while I was in college, I majored in economics. I had, grown up in the New York area. Finance was really one of the dominating employers. And I was pretty decent at math. So I knew I wanted to do something Wall Street oriented, really at an early age. And, you would read a lot of stuff in the papers, and that's where really the money was. So that's kind of, what I had focused myself on, in the period that I was going to school. Broadband really started to take off, and people were starting to get faster and faster internets in their homes. Fast forward to 2000, when I was graduating, I joined a small hedge fund as a trader, but the internet had made it possible that I could actually sit in front of a computer and sort of extract money out of the market and trade for myself without actually interacting with people. So that had really planted a seed as to the power of the internet. At that point, I also looked at sort of how the internet was now globalizing the economy in many ways. And, I had a successful run as a trader, but ultimately I knew that there was just more to life than staring at a couple of monitors all day and kind of pulling money out of the market. So I, planned to go to business school. And at that time, I really wanted to do something entrepreneurial because I knew I'd have not a 2-year vacation, but 2 years to kind of figure things out of, what I wanted to do next. I initially went into business school with the thought process that I'd do something in more of a corporate finance capacity when I graduated. But I started looking at some stuff internationally, and that's kind of what had forayed me into tech per se.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. You know, when you're in once you've gotten out of school, let's talk about that. When you're in school and you're about to make that transition, you know, to the work world, was it a seamless transition for you? How did you find that transition?
Really, out of undergrad, I was lucky, and I found a decent job that taught me a lot. I think the transition out of business school was a little bit more difficult. So I went to undergrad in Albany, and cost of college was relatively cheaper. I didn't have a significant amount of loans, but to go to business school, I was incurring six figures in debt. So the decision to kind of jump into entrepreneurship and do something on my own, there was a significant opportunity sort of cost of not going the traditional route into a well-paying consulting job, but or going into even a finance job at the corporate perspective. But the rationale that I had at the time was that I would have the degree, so I'd always necessarily have the ability to fall back upon that. You have that piece of paper, but knowing some of the things that I had learned as a trader and some of the acumen that I had picked up to kind of predict the future or identify trends early, I knew finance was not a place that I wanted to be when I was graduating business school in '07. And I knew some things about the mortgage market would have some sort of lasting impact. So I wanted to kind of steer clear, and entrepreneurship represented a viable path. More serendipitously than anything else, during business school, I had attended my cousin's wedding overseas in Bangladesh. He was a skilled computer engineer. He had built a lot of things that were going nowhere real fast. And that's sort of the lesson. But he ended up building the first cricket app on Facebook and the second soccer app on Facebook. And overnight, these things just took off. And I saw the promise of what technology can do. And he was sitting in a country 7,000-8,000 miles away, but still able to capitalize on what was happening here.
Let's talk for a second about this whole tech universe where we have now a blank canvas for people to take their ideas and to work with them and to build them. So when you're in the space of having created this media company, AlleyWatch, and an organization that's really watching what's going on with tech, watching what's going on in New York City in regards to tech, what would you say to students who are interested in trying to build on that canvas, make that canvas important, or find something that is an entrepreneurial venture for themselves?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of sort of take a step back and look at sort of, I kind of probably embody symbolically the transition into tech in New York. So, New York is at the epicenter of so many different industries: fashion, finance, advertising, publishing, media, healthcare, Wall Street, you name it, it's here. So there's a lot of people that have deep sort of domain expertise in these industries that are looking to kind of embrace technology for their own businesses, number one. Number two, the city really fundamentally had to kind of shift from its tax base of these high-paying Wall Street jobs into this sort of new economy, and that represented technology. So the city sort of championed technology. So within that path, from sort of an advice standpoint for students that are looking to get into entrepreneurship, do things that are entrepreneurial, I think it's really important to develop some sort of skill sets, something that you're very good at. You spend some time really building this domain expertise, and then you leverage that into an entrepreneurial capacity. Looking back at sort of my progression, my thing was to really quantitatively be able to look at a number of sort of factors and things and figure out a better way to do things. So I've applied that model to sort of media. It happens to be this media is focused on startups and tech, but some of the ideas that our team presents from this sort of background is applicable only in that startup world because it's willing to do things that are sort of cutting edge and things of that nature. There's never really been a better time to be an entrepreneur now. There's been a shifting of sort of what it means to work in New York, what it means to work globally. Organizations like WeWork have really redefined that concept of co-working and, you know, what that means, flexible working, the gig economy. It's no longer, you know, there's not that typical career path where you go to school, you work for a company for 30 years, you get a pension, and then you retire 40 years, 50 years.
Can we take one step into something that you said, which was gig economy? Can you give us like a quick overview of what that really means? I mean, you've got a good perspective of it in the sense that AlleyWatch has covered it in various different ways, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, so, you know, at that point, if you really look at it, I think Uber is probably the most, you know, relatable example of building a business, because, you know, at this time, Uber offers the flexibility to all its workers, and not workers, they're all independent actual contractors. They're not actual employees of WeWork, where you can kind of work on your own terms. So, you know, I was out in California about a month ago, and I was chatting with my Uber driver there, and I had asked him, you know, what got you into this? And he said, my father was sick, and I can't really maintain a schedule, a regular schedule of a 9 to 5, because I don't know when I'll be required to take care of my father. Now, the advances of the internet have made this sort of possible to manage a supply and demand of, you know, this person can work at a flexible schedule on their own terms and actually not be unemployed and be a contributing member to the society and able to earn enough there. So this, you know, gig economy provides a sort of flexibility to both companies to kind of get the staff that they need, as well as employees that are, or workers or contractors in this case, looking kind of necessarily have 1 or 2 jobs, kind of have all their eggs in one basket. You know, my sister was an employee at Lehman Brothers. She was a good employee there, but it disappeared overnight. And thousands of people lost their jobs overnight. So, you know, I think that has left some scars in people, and people are looking to do things that are, you know, a little bit more creative and on their own terms.
Yeah, and I'll contribute to that too with other platforms out there, because really Uber is just a platform, right? It's the platform where cars sit on one side and the people who need a car sit on the other. And the same thing with Upwork and places like that, where, you know, the skill over here of graphic design, there are people with these skills, and then on the other side are the people who need that graphic design skill. And in the middle is this platform called Upwork, which connects the two together. The person on one side gets paid for the skill of graphic design. The other person gets the product that they need. So it's excellent, right? This gig economy really allows us to monetize our specific skill sets.
Certainly, and it does it in, you know, again, that flexibility that's associated with it. It's across different borders, different sort of skill sets. You know, we maintain a very lean staff at the organization, so we've used a lot of these marketplaces to help us with certain things, because, you know, we don't necessarily, you know, if we're running a video series for a week, we don't necessarily need to have a videographer on staff. It just doesn't make sense for us. So it gives us a lot of capabilities of really acting big while still being small.
Yeah. And more importantly, you produce the content that you need to produce. So it's not even about being big or small. It's just like, what do I need to get done, and how do I get it done the most efficient way possible?
Certainly.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about New York City. You know, you grew up in Long Island, and then you went to school in SUNY. You're part of the state. It's literally part of you. When you see the transformation of work here in New York, how would you put it in a framework that's really understandable for people who are currently in college or might be graduating in a month or 2 or a year?
Yeah. So when I started in tech back in 2006, there was maybe 1 or 2 meetups. You'd see the same sort of people. There weren't, you know, there was no Google, there was no Facebook in New York. There was really no Facebook, or Facebook was a very early company, and you know, not what it is today. And again, New York was controlled by these traditional industries. After that sort of, you know, hedge fund collapse and Wall Street debacle and the mortgage crisis, there was really a shift. And that shift has been, we were very fortunate to have Mayor Bloomberg as our mayor, as an entrepreneur himself, really understood that, the city needed to diversify its tax base. And as a result, this came to this fruition of championing entrepreneurship and startups. And, the city was very active, companies were very active, and industry was very active in saying, like, listen, the workplace is changing. We need to embrace technology. And how are we going to do that? We need to champion entrepreneurship in order to do that. A lot of people also became very frustrated with their, previous jobs or their current jobs at the time. And they identified a problem that wasn't being solved. And then they decided to leave their cushy sort of job and go out and build a solution on their own. A lot of those people ended up selling those companies back to their previous employers, representing a success story. But to kind of fast forward that through this evolution, and it's been, just getting better and better each year for the students that are graduating now. One is, I'm assuming that a lot of your audience are business students. Coding and the actual engineering is great to have, but it's not necessarily a requirement to be a successful entrepreneur, because these things are becoming more and more sort of commonplace, and it also represents the means to get to a business goal. It's an execution item, which eventually will become commoditized as more and people start to learn how to code. You can use some of these marketplaces to get prototypes out there. But, the ecosystem itself has grown. There's over 300,000 people working in tech in New York in some capacity right now. On any given night of the week, there's, I would say, anywhere to 50 to 60 different events. So if you're interested in building a food business, there's somewhere for you to go. It wasn't the case like that 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. If you're interested in artificial intelligence and how that's being applied to real estate, there's groups for that. Maybe not every night of the week, but certainly quarterly, you'll find something very specific to that, and you'll find a community. One of the also nice things is if you look at the evolution of New York versus Silicon Valley and Boston, in the 70s, both Boston and Silicon Valley had deep engineering talent, similar ecosystems and structural factors. Silicon Valley really embraced technology and started kind of championing entrepreneurship. You couldn't get entrepreneurs to shut up about what they were talking about. And Boston was very secretive, focused on robotics, and was very hush-hush. And that affected the sort of trajectory of the two ecosystems, where Silicon Valley is leaps and bounds ahead. New York kind of entered the race probably a little bit later with Web 1.0 in the early 1998, in that era, the 2000s. And New York really embraced that mentality of, New York is a very cutthroat place in most industries, but in technology, it's not. Everyone is very open and receptive to one another. So, there's a place for everyone within this ecosystem because we're all in it together. And we also kind of have this common goal of trying to beat Silicon Valley. So there's a lot of knowledge sharing and insights. And, for that reason, the community has become very collaborative. So, both students alike, as well as people that are seasoned, that are well into their 50s and 60s, are coming to the same place from different socioeconomic backgrounds, but with the one common goal of like, hey, I'm wanting to build something cool. How do I do this? I need help. And people are willing to help, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's so true. And my students who have come up with some excellent ideas, they really fine-tune certain markets and they're working on those ideas. And a few of them are tech focused and a few of them are product or service focused. But all of them kind of have something in common, which is this kind of sensibility that, oh my God, in New York City, I can get it done because I have access to so many different things here. I have access to this, I have access to that, I have access to connecting to people, I have access to angel funding and seed funding. And there isn't just a few of those, and they aren't super exclusive sitting in country clubs. They're actually really accessible places that if you continue to go to those different types of events like you're talking about, you can connect to those places and really get involved. So that's amazing. I love what you said about those pieces. One of my students had a question for you, and I love this question. He said, can I turn a blog into a media company?
That's basically what we did. But we went in at the beginning to really build a business. So, if you just have a blog and you haven't thought about how to kind of build it into a business, you need to start thinking about that quickly. But, as you're building audience, certainly, right now, media is a very difficult business. We're all chasing the same sort of eyeballs. But if you can figure out how to get audience sort of more efficiently than anyone else, and at the end of the day, and how you can create content more efficiently than anyone else, it can certainly be a viable business. All these businesses, it doesn't matter what you're in, it's not necessarily about the idea anymore. It's about your ability to execute upon that idea. So, and how you kind of focus in a sort of a linear fashion, which kind of becomes exponential if you want to get to sort of the VC funding. But, you could certainly build a business in media. There's a lot of strong companies, especially in New York, that have come out. But it's not none of these businesses that you see that are successful, you'll hear the founders talk about it, but they really won't tell you, for lack of a better word, the crappy times. If you look at Vice is a multi-billion-dollar company now. It was started in the mid-90s, but no one really talks about that first 20 years. Yeah. They only think about the rosy things. And, entrepreneurs have a bit of PTSD, I think, when it comes to this. And they forget about the time, early on when they were scrubbing the toilets and doing all the stuff and making these things. And yeah, we became a success and this is it. But, one advice is, in any business that you're looking at, study the successes, obviously, for lessons. But I think one of the important things is study failure. 95% of these businesses fail. So you'll learn a lot more from not knowing what not to do than trying to replicate what someone else did years ago when the marketplace was different.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is some great advice there. And when you talk about the way that organizations grow and evolve, especially in a giant ecosystem like New York City, if you were to pinpoint some key factors, some key ways that students can get involved with the New York City ecosystem of startups, being a business student and not being a techie, what are some of the key ways that they could do that?
Engage with the community. So there's we have an events calendar. There's other events calendars out there. Kind of find your niche, start contributing to the community, start learning from the community. I'm not for sort of self-promotion purposes, but AlleyWatch serves as a resource for what's happening in tech. We have a great, we cover pretty much every funding in the city. So kind of looking at companies and reading the articles about, what companies got funded. And we have these, interviews with these companies that got funded. So you can really learn from these pieces. Because we don't really like to write about exactly, a PR type fluff piece. We really want to know, what is the company doing? What is the business? And there's other resources sort of out there. Digital.nyc is a great resource that the city has provided. Lists all events, jobs, things like that. It has some content as well. So you can kind of really learn from the community and engage with the community. The other sort of, piece of advice is, if, for early entrepreneurs, people that are thinking about launching businesses, one of the things that I see most often that's kind of, it's not that it's wrong, but it's just kind of, people that don't have experience don't realize it. When you're building something that's tech enabled in this day and age, my first company was in gaming, in the tech space. So we're building a tech-based company that's, on the internet. Now, previous sort of iterations of building a gaming company meant you were building something like Monopoly. It's on a shelf and it's in a box, and that's it. You get it out in the box, and that's the final product. Whereas tech is consistently needs to be iterated, not because the product isn't good. One is you need to keep up engagement. So I know kids in your audience play these different games, and you're on Facebook, and Facebook's a mature product, but it's always consistently introducing new features. One, because they need you to engage. Number two, they need you to talk to your friends about it. So you don't want to build this sort of Ferrari of products on day one. Maybe build this sort of baby Bentley, as you're doing it, and then kind of make data-driven decisions based on what people are responding to well, talk to your customers, see what's happening, get feedback. Because, you know, as an early entrepreneur, you don't have a lot of resources. If you can put together some money to hire maybe a developer, you want to make sure that you're spending this money efficiently and that it's going to work. So, you know, kind of put your pride aside, and then, you know, the same thing that happens is, you know, when you launch a product, you want it to be perfect on day one. And that really never happens. It should be a little imperfect, and, you know, you just kind of get it out there, get some traction, get it out there so it's not completely embarrassing. I think Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, said it best. It's like, you know, jump off the cliff and then figure out how to fly on the way down. So, you know, you just want to get it out there, get something there, because if you sit there and you try to kind of perfect it, you're going to waste a lot of time, and the market's going to change. And someone will have swooped up your idea and executed faster than you.
Yeah, that's very true. When you mentioned something earlier, and I just wanted to take a deeper dive into it, and that was this idea that as people in this ecosystem, as people in this city of New York, or any city, how do you best contribute? You know, when you're first starting out, how do you contribute to that group, whatever it might be that you're involved in? What are some really useful examples that you've seen of people that they come in, they're brand new, and they just start participating, so to speak, and get involved in such a way that where their contribution shows value and builds value for other people, so therefore they become more and more engaged in the community, they get more out of it, but they also get more back, and so there's a real relationship that's built there.
Yeah, you know, it's to have really, you know, not to look at it sort of specifically, but always just to think that to have a give first mentality, like you mentioned. You know, New York is kind of very cognizant. As large as the tech ecosystem is, it's very small also. So the people that are consistently asking for things and not, you know, doing anything to contribute, maybe people aren't writing articles about them, but it's just known that this person is not, you know, this person just takes and is taking net and not really giving anything back. Participating in events is sort of a great way. If you have something to sort of say and, you know, you can contribute, offering to speak on panels, organizing events is also a great way to kind of, you know, build your name within the community. Blogging about things. If you attend an event and maybe you're not sure, but maybe you give some of the resources that you learned during the event and sharing it with people, then maybe sharing that with the event organizer. And then maybe the event organizer is so happy that they share it in their follow-up email to everyone who attended the event. So then, you know, you're getting your name out there. Oh, this person, you know, kind of wrote about this article and then shared these key lessons that they learned. So just having that give first sort of mentality is important. And, you know, there's ways to, you know, kind of, you know, build your personal sort of brand out there through public speaking, giving, moderating, but just being an active member of the community and having like really like a no sort of a-hole type rule, which is important. You know, within the tech community, everyone wants to kind of, you know, work with people, engage people, and help people that they actually like find pleasant. Yeah. If someone is this sort of high-strung person that, you know, is just wants to take, and, you know, is just asking them to give all the time, just like this person, like, I don't want to deal with this person.
Yeah. And I'll add to it too. I'll say that, you know, if you're let's say you're a new student and you're like, well, I can't moderate a panel, I can't do those kinds of things, I can't speak on what I've got. I always tell people, well, start with what you know right now and what you want to know, and then write about that, because oftentimes it's about your discovery of the ecosystem itself, to use the terms that I like to use, or the tech environment, the tech economy here in New York City. If you're trying to understand it, there's probably 1,000 or thousands of other people also trying to understand it at the same level that you are. So if you're able to present and say, look, I don't really know what's going on here, so let me talk about my day in the life of discovering what it is to try to get a job in tech and not be a techie, right? Just that really basic thing sounds really simple, but there's so many people with that question. And that's what the internet provides us, is a way to take that kind of content and amplify it out there.
Certainly, it's great sort of advice, and you think that maybe I can't speak on this sort of event, but it might be that students go and they organize something, at your college, organize it with another neighboring college in the city, and they do some panels, and they invite a couple of VCs, and then they get that sort of a little bit of moderating experience. I'm sure you guys have some sort of entrepreneurship club, and every other school has some sort of club, and kind of linking the resources together. Even attending these events, some of the events tend to be expensive, and they're cost prohibitive for young students, and it doesn't make sense. But you can go and volunteer there, help people sort of register, and you get to kind of sit there and hear some of the greatest speakers in New York, some of the titans of industry speak at some of these conferences, and all you had to do was give up an hour of your time, and you got to meet a couple of people and hand out a couple of badges and help sort of registration. So that's a great way to kind of backdoor your way into it. And it's a smart way to do it, because I wouldn't advocate paying thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars to attend any sort of event when you can get this sort of knowledge elsewhere. But I think what we've both touched on in different ways is really immersing yourself. It's like akin to kind of riding a bicycle. You can read a book about riding a bicycle, but pretty much when you get on the bicycle, you're not going to be able to ride it after reading the book. So you can read about the tech economy. You're going to know a lot more about it, but actually just kind of putting yourself out there and maybe falling and maybe embarrassing yourself, maybe asking the wrong questions. You can't be afraid to do that. And there are really no wrong questions, I guess. But, you might think, oh, well, this person doesn't want to talk to me. Everyone is pretty nice and very accessible. And, what we had, also touched upon is, finding some people that want to help you, that you build a rapport with, that you've given something to, maybe you volunteered with them, maybe you interned with them. And it doesn't have to be within sort of the tech industry. It doesn't have to be a VC. It could be outside of that. The MetroCard, it's $2.75. It can get you to titans of industry all over the city. So if you are interested in dog food and building a dog food care, there's someone here that probably works at Purina that you can get a hold of. You got to be a little bit shrewd. You got to be a little bit of a hustler, but you're going to get in front of them one way or another. Just don't be creepy about it.
That's right. That's right. Always keep the creep factor at 1 or 2 on a scale of 10. Maximum. Yeah. When we're looking at these things and we're thinking about this big city of New York, we talked about some ways to kind of enter into it. We talked about a few ways for people to kind of maneuver once they're there. I'd love for you to chat just briefly about what are some of the trajectories that you're seeing, direction that New York City is moving in terms of tech and all the other pieces of tech around it. Where do you think it's going to go in the next 3 to 5 years that might point students in a specific direction?
So, as I touched upon earlier, New York is at the epicenter of finance, fashion, advertising, media, publishing, healthcare. Healthcare is one of the largest employers in New York, which people don't really think about. So all these industries are touching upon tech. So if you're thinking about kind of how you're going to contribute to this ecosystem from a career standpoint, how you're going to position yourself, because the likelihood of you going to work at a Goldman Sachs and work there for 30 years, or not to single out Goldman Sachs, to work at any sort of these established companies and be there for 30, 40, 50 years is pretty slim these days. Just economic factors have just, made that difference. Sometimes it's better for you to kind of hop around and leverage offers. But so, the suggestion there is maybe, immediately out of school, if you don't want to just jump into the sort of tech, entrepreneurial route and build your own thing, go work at one of these companies in an industry that you'd like to build something for. This way you'll get to identify the industry itself from being within. You'll probably get to identify a number of problems that the industry has that you need to solve. You'll build some connections, and you'll be able to network within the community, and you might even be able to find your co-founder there that has identified this same problem. Him or her might be sitting at a desk a couple of feet away from you. So, build that sort of domain expertise and get really good at what you're learning and take in as much as you can. And then as you're sort of navigating this sort of path, start talking to people. In your industry, outside of your industry, as you're building a business, it's really, important to go out and validate the idea that you have. So, right now you might be, validating a specific idea, but you might be using your career to validate your career path. So, you get into something at the beginning and, one of the things that I'll tell, your students, and, I don't know if they've heard this before or not, no job description has ever been written accurately as to what the job entails. So you think you're going to be doing this, you actually get to the job and it's that. So you kind of got to figure that out and what this is about, and take some time there and leverage yourself in. So, you might be picking up something, you might be working in credit card marketing at a bank, but that can position you to work at, marketing for a fintech company. But it could also position you to work in marketing for a consumer goods company. So, really kind of, pick up on the expertise of what you're doing, getting great in it, get good at it, and follow the people that are thought leaders in your industry and in the thing, and understand what they're doing. Attend their events, read what they're doing, become an expert. So, I had mentioned this to you previously, if Abe Lincoln had said, if I have 7 years to chop down a tree, I spent 6 years sharpening my axe. So that first, couple of years out of college is really an important time for you to sharpen that axe, pick up a different bunch of skill sets, and also explore, what your potential career path is going to be. Because it's probably not what you think it is today, and it's probably not what you think it is tomorrow. And maybe even 10 years from now, that might not be the case. So, this is, you think that you want to do that, you might ever end up pivoting. Life has really become a number of pivots, in many cases. That sort of linear progression, it'll be there for some, but the numbers are lessening and lessening.
One last question, and I love this question just because it's an evolution of what's happening with the education system in conjunction with technology, but also in conjunction with careers in general. The Google and a few of the other tech companies, Microsoft, have said, a bachelor's is no longer required for you to go to work for us anymore, which means that people are looking more for skill sets and looking more for effort and energy and projects, and what type of projects have you worked on, and what was the outcome of that project, and what have you produced and what have you made. There's much more of that kind of mentality because people can produce and make things pretty fantastic in a fantastical kind of way in terms of tech. But they can also do it in terms of like marketing and building different marketing campaigns and social media. So it's not always about building a program. You can also use your marketing skills and kind of showcase those things too. So with that in mind, what advice would you have if you're actually talking to students, here at BMCC? People are going to leave with an associate's degree. Some are going to transfer into a four-year college before they finish their associates, but they're going to continue their education. Some are going to leave and start a company. What advice do you have for them right now about this evolution in education?
Yeah. So, people question the value. I've always questioned the value of education. I've always been a strong proponent of education. People point to examples like Zuckerberg dropped out of college and Bill Gates dropped out of college. And it tends to be a bit of a fallacious logic because not everyone that drops out of college becomes the next Bill Gates, or not everyone who goes to college becomes the next Bill Gates. So there's not really that correlation. These people were unique individuals, prodigies in their case. So by all means, if you're a prodigy and you think you can succeed, don't enroll in college. I'll give you that sort of advice. But for the 99.9%, college serves as a great, exploration ground, whether it's a, 2-year, 4-year program, even some sort of vocational program, to, again, really sharpen that skill set, and expose your mind to different things that you may or may not have necessarily encountered. I know that many of your students are going through sort of prerequisite courses that they hate, like, oh, I want to be a finance person. Why do I need to take this marketing class? Why do I need to do this? So, when looking, I'm a type A quant person. So when I went to business school and I had to take all these soft classes like managing change and this and that, I'm like, bring on the finance, bring on the stats. And I literally do not, I work in spreadsheets because I'm a spreadsheet person, but I'm doing things that have nothing to do with finance and spreadsheets. However, the things that I do use on a daily basis are the things for my management classes, for my managing change classes, my leadership classes, things like that. So all these soft things that I hated, and like at the time are actually the ones that are most useful for me. So, you know, college forces you and education forces you to do that. Practical training is important. So, you know, you could be the best sort of college student, but you have zero common sense and zero street smarts. You may or may not get very far. You know, you'll be a good worker somewhere and locked up in sort of a desk somewhere, and you know, you'll probably do pretty well. But you know, it's really maintaining a balance between some of these, you know, the traditional sort of educational skills, and then learning in the practicum. As I had mentioned, none of these job descriptions are accurate. So none of the stuff that you're using in sort of in your coursework, you know, may or may not train you for that specific job function. But from a holistic and sort of thematic things, it's going to give you a critical reasoning and thought process that you will be able to use in your job process. It just might not be the actual spreadsheet or the calculation, but thinking about how we got to that calculation is what's more important.
So that's such a great way to frame it as far as education goes, and it's an important way to kind of put the things that we're doing in school into the streets in New York and how they really do fit together when it comes to excelling. Right? You have, in order to excel without failing as much, I think education is a great way to reduce the amount of failure that you could have because of all these different skill sets that you're going to gather together, whether it's sociology and understanding the dynamics of people, or whether it's cultural studies and understanding the way why a certain group of people is behaving a certain way in your marketing class. Like all these kinds of things fit together for a lot of different reasons. So I couldn't agree with you more. Reza, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this session. It has been very informative, very insightful. I couldn't have done it without you.
All right. Thank you for having me. I was glad to be here and I enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And be sure, guys, you can see he's gone to some great universities and gotten some great education in a bunch of different places. Make sure you check him out. Check him out on LinkedIn and all the other places that are available there too. I'm going to give you guys a quick little preview again of just some of the things that are coming up and what's happened this week as far as here in the Global Entrepreneurship Week. We have this brand new series here at BMCC called Ask the Entrepreneur. It's going to be going on from now indefinitely, and we'll be having these at least every few weeks. You'll be able to have a conversation with different entrepreneurs all around New York City, some in other parts of the world. Reza, Chowdhury, thanks so much for your time and energy and effort today. I could not have done this without you, and it's so good to have you here. Be sure you check out AlleyWatch if you're even slightly interested in technology or you want to work in a field where it is possible to get to take and apply all your business skills to a very fast growing space. Feel free to check into that. And then don't forget about BMCC. We're here for you to help you out anytime you need it. So thanks so much. And I appreciate your time and energy today. I will see you guys again real soon. And Reza, see you later.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye.